Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 18th chapter in the book of Proverbs. This chapter is 24 verses long, so we divided it in two. We covered the first 12. We're going to take this from 13 all the way home to 24 today, but we're going to review the first 12 verses, beginning with the second, which reads, "A fool does not delight in understanding, but in uncovering his own heart. A fool does not have understanding because they do not want to have understanding. They have no desire, drive, or motivation to attain understanding. They are not creatures prone to contemplation, but rather to conversation." So you can tell a fool by the way that they talk. They will uncover their heart. They will reveal things. They will say the part you're not supposed to say out loud. That you should harbor in silence, they will say that out loud. And it's all because they lack understanding, and the entire reason they lack understanding is because they lack a desire and do not delight. They do not find joy or satisfaction. They have no intellectual stimuli that converts into anything pleasurable for them. Verse 4, "The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a flowing stream." The next two verses we're going to read revert back to the fool, but now it's the words of the wise. So the wise and the fools are contrasted either in the verse itself or through subsequent readings of the verses. That contrast appears and abounds throughout here. So deep waters, that can mean one of two things: obscurity or profundity. We also read that term in chapter 20, verse 5, but here it refers clearly to profundity, because they're talking about the fountain, the wisdom of wisdom, which flows and exudes from them like a flowing stream. It is a fountain of life, a fountain of water. Water is equated and synonymous with life in the Bible. Verse 6, "A fool's lip enter into strife, and his mouth calls for blows. The avoidance of conflict and unnecessary confrontation is a mark and measure of wisdom, but a fool cannot help themselves." They are asking for it. They are signing themselves up to get beat up with their foolish so their lips and their mouth. Now, this is not their literal physical lips or mouth that are the source of their problems, but the words which emanate therefrom. So another one is a tongue. That's another term we read through the Bible, but what's really meant there. So the fool's words enters into strife. Their words are provocative and confrontational, and their mouth, their words, calls for blows. They say things that invite retaliatory responses from other foolish people. Get enough foolish people in the room, and the contagion of foolishness will erupt into violent confrontation. "A fool's mouth is his own ruin, and his lips are the snare of his life." So we read mouth and lips in the reverse order. In the verse 6, it was lips and mouth. In 7, it's mouth and lips, but the same thing. Now, strife, you can emerge victorious from strife, but he who lives by the sword eventually dies by it. So a fool gets themselves, they write, their mouths write checks that their bodies cannot cash, and when it's time to pay, they are too foolish. It is too little, too late to learn from their foolishness. And the snare, it just means that they trap themselves. They can say one lie and then have to invent another lie to protect the lie, and eventually, inevitably, they get ensnared in the entangling of their network of lies. Verse 10, "The name of Yahweh is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe." There is no distinction drawn between the name and the person, especially of Yahweh. He is as literally as close as the mention of his name. You can say his name and he is there, provided, of course, that you are in the true spirit and intent. You cannot just say it, and he does not magically appear. But for those who does, the righteous who take refuge in him, it functions in a parallel. The physical parallel is as a strong tower. It provides protection, fortification, to an army being besieged, so the name of Yahweh can protect us from the infirmities and vicissitudes of life. And this is where the righteous retreat when they tough get going. We have our very present help in times of trouble, and we can all we have to do is think on him and meditate on him and invite him into our lives in prayer, and he will be there and he will provide security and satisfaction. Whereas the rich man, who we're going to read of in the next verse, they have a different source of security. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. This is not all rich people. He is not typecasting rich people. Solomon himself was rich, but he had about as healthy a disposition and attitude towards wealth as anyone else. So he knew the illusion that money provides security that lasts. You cannot take anything with you, and even if you manage to make it through life with the fortune acquired, that you do not squander away, or does not fall into the hands of strangers or fritters away. You cannot take any of it with you, and even if you leave a sum of inheritance for your progeny, it's not going to do you any good where you're going. So the security that wealth can provide is fleeting, it is physical, it is carnal, it is temporal, and it is only temporary. It is illusory, it is imaginary. We ascribe power to money that, quite frankly, isn't there, because we look to it as the end-all, be-all, cure-all, panacea to all our problems, when the name of Yahweh is more than sufficient to function as our strong tower, strong city, to close terms. Before destruction, the heart of a man is haughty, and before esteem is humility. Haughtiness, which precipitates destruction, is the arrogant, prideful, just conceited state of mind, state of being. So these types of people invite destruction into their life because they provoke people with their pride and their ego and their arrogance. So at the root of all destruction is usually a human failure, a human deficiency, and that deficiency is identified here as haughtiness. But the antithetical juxtaposition, whereby the opposite extreme is made, the superiority of the opposite extreme is self-evident. Before esteem is humility. This does not calculate or compute to the natural man, who has to esteem himself and exalt himself and put himself up on a pedestal, when humility is the counterintuitive recipe for that exalted end. So this parallels the New Testament paradox: he who humbles himself shall be exalted, he who exalts himself shall be humbled. Verse 13, lesson itself, 18th chapter in the book of Proverbs. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. To comment on something without knowing all the facts is a recipe for embarrassment, and it is a species of foolishness. You're going to look foolish when something that you didn't you didn't take the due diligence to discover emerges, because you prematurely rush to a prejudicial judgment. You determine the matter before even without a shred of investigative integrity, without weighing the facts, without hearing the facts, without investigating all sides to the story. So if you rush to snap judgments, you are going to look foolish and embarrass yourself in the process thereof. So we really owe it to ourselves, not only ourselves, but also especially the ones that who are affected by our judgment, to arrive at the most balanced and thorough conclusion possible, or by really digging into all the available resources and facts of that which we are going to answer on. To answer a matter is to make a judgment call. The spirit of the man sustains him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? Physical infirmities. Now the spiritual element, the higher element of nature, provides us with hope, which is the engine which sustains us in our struggle. So we all get sick, physically sick, but our spirit remains unbendable and unbreakable. But if our spiritual element, if that collapses or deteriorates, then we have no resources to sustain ourselves. It is far easier to apply medicinal wounds to medicine to material wounds, carnal fleshly wounds, than it is the spirit. It is a matter of graver difficulty and complexity, precisely because it lays in the invisible world. So the cure to a broken spirit is the name of Yahweh. That will strengthen our spirit when it is broken. But apart from a broken spirit, you are incapable of authentic worship. So you have to be broken in order to really access and utilize the fullness of the power of the name. The heart of the understanding one gets knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Earlier we read that a fool does not delight in understanding. Here we read that an understanding one gets knowledge because they want it, they live it, they live for it, they love it, they look for it, and they learn from it. So the heart is their orientation and disposition, your heart's desire. So by that we understand the understanding one desires knowledge, and they get what they want because they pursue what they want, and they immerse themselves in the activity, in the habitual activity of the process of acquiring greater levels of understanding and knowledge and wisdom. So these three entities, these three levels of intelligences, can be understood as presented in the hierarchy of intelligence, which is, as I like to explain it, at the foundational level lays knowledge. Knowledge consists of knowing the facts. Understanding is the more advanced level. This is the mid-level. This is understanding the underlying causes and connections within and between facts. You understand why. Understanding entails knowing why something is true, whereas knowledge merely entails knowing that something is true. But above and beyond the rest, at the tippy top of the metaphorical pyramid, is wisdom, whose relationship. So if knowledge is the ability to dissect the puzzle pieces, analogous to puzzle pieces, items of information, wisdom is the ability to complete the picture in a coherent whole. It combines the broadest panoramic view. It consists in tying all the facts in the understanding together. So one can be knowledgeable and understanding without being wise. One cannot be wise without understanding and knowledgeable. So this is why the understanding one, you increase in understanding by increasing in knowledge, because the more facts you have at your disposal, the more aware and you will be of their connections and causes. And the ear of the wise, now our ears will be gravitated and inclined towards knowledge, because with an increase of wisdom, much like understanding, consists in an increase of the lower level tier of intelligence. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. One did not enter into a palace of a man as prestigious as Solomon empty-handed. He entertained visitors from all across the world who came to see him, but this was also a source of his income, because these visitors would be awed by the majesty of his palace and his temple and his wisdom, but they would also bring gifts in order to gain access to his presence. One could not kick on the door without showing up. So a gift would have went a long way for royalty and great men. That term can be rich or aristocratic, or because greatness is not the general definition of greatness as defined in the New Testament consists in servitude, but he's talking about great as in levels of positions of socioeconomic prominence. The first to state his own case is right until another comes and examines him. In the cross and fire exchange of debate, it is more advantageous to present your argument after one who presents theirs first, because you have the added advantage of adjusting and accommodating your argument in light of what has just recently been stated. So the first one, as convincing as he is, he's not going to be so convincing once his term is up, once his time is up, once the counterpart gets his chance to make his case. And examines him, so he really questions what he just heard and puts it all into perspective and shines some illumination on what it is, and no longer completely right or as accepted as completely correct as it once was. The lot settles dispute and separates between the mighty. The casting of lots was a game of chance comparable to rolling of dice, in that it is arbitrary, yet Yahweh is identified as the one who determines where they land in 1633. So the practice of casting lots to settle disputes or answer questions is pagan, but it is also biblical, such as, for instance, when Jonah is on the sea storm, on ship, asleep in the lower deck of the ship, when suddenly the seashore storm erupts all around him. The pagan sailors cast lots, and they land on Jonah, and he gives his witness, I am Jonah, an Israelite, a follower of the God of Israel, the maker of the heaven and earth. But we also find it in Acts 1, the first chapter. Judas's replacement is determined by the casting of lots. It lines up on Matthias, a figure we don't hear from again in the Bible, but history tells us that he died a martyr in Cappadocia, so he was a stalwart, but for all intents and purposes, Paul was Judas's replacement. A brother transgressed against is a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a citadel. Now, brother can be literal brother, such as Esau in Jacob's case, but it can also be friends. So friends, wounded friends. If you wound your friends, then that's going to be a tough deal to crack. Nevertheless, it is possible. The time does heal all wounds, but if you treat your friend like an enemy, transgress against him, then that's going to damage the relationship as it stands between them and the bars of a citadel. So strong city, once more, entails a fortification. A citadel is a defense tower, but it also had bars, so he's talking about jail. Contentions, if you live for confrontation, then you are imprisoned in an inferior lifestyle choice. A man's stomach is satisfied from the fruit of his mouth. He is satisfied by the increase of his lips. So satisfaction derives from two sources. One, the stomach is satisfied by the fruit of his mouth. That's the food that we ingest, the food we eat, the food we put in and is digest. It goes from our mouths into our stomachs, and we are physically replenished and nourished and satisfied. So there is satisfaction, carnal satisfaction, that can be obtained from the eating of food. But also another source of satisfaction is the increase of his lips. So remember, lips is words, not literal lips, not literal or physical lips. So there is some satisfaction in talking much, but verbosity is the sign of a fool. A fool talks because they have to say something. A wise man talks because they have something to say, to paraphrase the Athenian philosopher Plato. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those loving it eat its fruit. Our words are weapons. They have the power to, a tool has the power to build and construct a barn, but it also has the power to bash someone over the head. Our words are similar. Our words can be used to impart life, impart healing, impart forgiveness, to damage relationships. We can also kill relationships, kill friendships. So there is that element of death, the potentiality of life and death. Our words, there is power in words. Words have more than mere meaning. They have power. We can create things. But all those who love words will eat its fruit. They will say the right things. They will impart words of life and not death, although occasion we do at least have the culpability or potentiality to say the wrong things, which are likened to a deathly influence. He who has found a wife has found good and receives favor from Yahweh. A wife is a gift from God, a good wife. That's something you don't want to factor in by sheer lust alone. You want to consult Yahweh in prayer before you select your wife, to make sure that she is approved by him and is sent to you from him. So an inheritance comes from a father, but a good wife comes from Yahweh, we read elsewhere, and read the fullest description of the ideal wife in the 31st chapter of this book. Not Solomon's words, but those of Lemuel, a king. Lemuel, Agar's the 30th chapter. But there's literally nothing like a wife. Having a married partner with whom you love can not only make a difference, but make the difference. It's really an equation, a mathematical equation of 1 + 1 = 3. You become more than the sums of your own parts. This is the reason that marriage was instituted and created, so that two may become one. And that is a gift beyond reckoning, and good is an understatement for what one finds in the gracious gift of a truly godly wife from Yahweh. The poor speaks beseechingly, but the rich answers fiercely. this verse does not condone the insulting or degradation of the poor. It simply laments over a fact of life that the poor are a lot easier to be insulted because they don't have the resources or means at their disposal. It's easier to speak about them certain ways, say they're lazy, they're stupid, they have no ambition, but it's also, the rich, we're going to use more measured words, and this is the fallen nature, which shows preferential partiality to the rich because they have something that can help us. So, of course, we're going to treat the poor as less than the rich. Even though the rich have the power to harm us, they also have the power to help us. And with the faint hope and expectation that they will use their resources for good is why we butter them up. But we should speak of the poor. We should not acknowledge these distinctions should not cease to exist. They will not cease to exist. They should only cease to matter. We should weigh each person on their merits, their moral merits, and rather than their socioeconomic status or station. A man of friends might come to ruin, but there is a loving one who sticks closer than a brother. Friends are not real friends if they bring you to ruin. So the moral of the story is be careful and selective in who you select as friends. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And if you don't get rid of the wrong friends, you will never meet or make the right friends. So don't hang around those who lead you to destructive choices, destructive paths, destructive pursuits, but look above to the loving one. That word is capitalized, so that is a reference to divinity. He is closer than a brother, and a brother is born for adversity. We read in some earlier chapter. It's close to this one, but so brother is greater than a friend, but nothing is greater than our God. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.